Hi, everybody. Welcome to All Things Metaphysical podcast with Kellie and Gail. I am the Gail part.
I am the Kelly part.
So, we were just talking about what we might want to talk about today, and there's been lots of things that come up. So, Kellie, I'll turn it over to you to get started today.
Okay. I want to talk about triggers. I know it's never a pleasant thing to talk about, but it seems like the energies lately have been really heavy, and little things that ordinarily we would just let roll off our backs are kind of triggering people. Um, it can be something as small as someone's thinking they're complimenting something you're wearing that was given to you by someone close to you that is now on the other side, or it can be a job situation. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier who had a situation in her job where one of the owners of the company she works with barged into her office screaming and yelling and ended up crying and sobbing on a chair in her office. And what do you do with that? You know, she said it really, this had nothing really to do with her or the job she was doing. And clearly it was about someone else who is in crisis. And this is a psychiatrist's office.
That is not surprising at all.
So, but you can imagine if you're working in a psychiatrist's office and the psychiatrist comes in and falls apart in your office, it would be quite, what did I do to deserve this? What did I cause this? What could I have done differently? So those are kind of the things that I've heard about this week.
Well, being that I worked in behavioral health and still work in behavioral health, I have had psychiatrists come to my office very upset, and I've had nurse practitioners break down in my office
Hmm.
very upset. And the way that I always looked at it is I never did anything in those situations, but I was the trustworthy one that everyone came to.
Right. Yes.
So, I just was like, okay, well, what do you need? How can I help? How are you going to manage the rest of the day?
And that is because you are trained, you would have that, but if you're a secretary working in the books doing billing,
Yeah,
she was a little bit put off, and she absolutely was hysterical by the time she called me and had already left and was now sobbing in her car in the parking lot. So, those kinds of, and that was a really severe thing to
mhm,
happen to someone. So I don't know who wouldn't be triggered by that on some level,
mhm.
but it seems like lately things are kind of pushing people to the edge.
Very
And
much
how
so.
how do we deal with that? What do you do when you find you're being pushed? How do you handle it?
Yeah, well, I can't say that I always handle it beautifully. um, my new boss is so supportive. So before I do anything that's going to get me in trouble or send an email, which I've done in the past that have gotten me in trouble,
Yeah,
I'll
I've done.
call and read them to her, or I'll call and read them to some of my friends who are watching right now as well. And I'll be like, how does this sound to you? And they're like, yeah, don't send that.
Right.
Unless you want to incite a riot, don't send that. And I sometimes tend to react more on the emotional side because I am
Mhm.
such an empath. So not
Right.
only am I feeling my own feelings, but I'm feeling the emotions of the other people as well. So I also want to also take a quick second and say if you're watching us and you have questions, please put them in the comments section and we will do our best. Also, let us know where you're watching us from. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, so for me, I tend to since I'm a Scorpio, that passionate, I tend to get really emotional. I burn out pretty fast. Like if you can give me 10 minutes to just vent, I'll then be able to do the logical thing. But for me, I'll immediately go to the emotional place first.
Right. I tend to go to the what is fair,
Uh-huh.
and it drives me insane to see situations that are not fair. And
Mhm.
it has taken me a very long time working on that to where I don't overreact at this point, usually, unless it's something close and personal. Um, but yeah, those things, that's my biggest trigger. There was a situation recently where a someone was getting bullied
Mhm.
because of what they were wearing and how they looked. Now, I live in a very, very, very rural town, and we don't see many people from different countries coming through here. And a gentleman came through recently with his family, which made it worse, and they were harassed at a gas station
Mhm.
just because of the way they looked. And that the gas station owner was kind of holding me back because he could see I was about to blow up with this local person who was harassing these people. Those kinds of things really, really get me. And I did ultimately have to go out there and make a scene because it was wrong what they were doing.
Mhm.
It was just wrong. Those kinds of things really do get me. Has to be fair, has to be equitable. Don't beat up on people. It's just wrong.
I feel the same way, and that gets me in trouble at work. The other thing too sometimes is not only in situations where you're triggered, if you work in an office or a big building, you're also getting the energy of everything that's going on in that building. So I think
Mhm.
one of the most important things for people right now is to make sure that their energy is contained and they're not picking up a lot of energy from other people. And one of our viewers said they would have done the same thing as you, Kelly. I probably would have been the
Oh,
I
in this situation, yeah, that's the way I used to be. I would just, hair trigger. If something hits me as being unfair, I was in the middle of it, and I do kind of hold myself back a little bit now, but it still bothers me. I still have to ultimately say something.
yeah.
It just, it's like I can't help myself.
And I used to be that way a lot too. I think as I've gotten older, I realize not everything is my battle. In those types of situations like you are in, though, I probably would have done something too. But like I'll find for work now that I won't intervene, where I used to intervene a lot and be like, this isn't fair. Why are you doing this? You have two people who are doing the same jobs. You're treating them both very differently.
Right,
I've got because I've also realized that when I do that, it doesn't give the person a chance who's in it to figure out what they need to do. So some of
right.
that can be enabling as well.
Right, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, years and years ago, I got in a situation where the person who was being harassed actually said, I can handle this. Thank you, but I can handle this. And, then I did have to take a giant step back and go, wait a minute, maybe I'm interfering where I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But sometimes people aren't like that. Sometimes you can tell when someone's being really, really, battered in at least mentally, and then I feel like I have to. But I am also the person who saw someone toss a puppy out of the truck window, picked the puppy up, followed him all the way to his house, 45 miles away. So, kind of depends on the situation. Should I have
Mhm.
done that? Probably not.
Probably not.
But I did. Yeah,
And we all do those things in the heat of the moment,
yeah,
and it's really learning to discern what is really in your best interest. Because,
right,
and sometimes depending on lessons you learned growing up, you've overstepped because you had to, and that's how you survived. So how do you learn to balance that now? And then the other piece of that is, as an empath, you feel all of it. How do
right,
you not respond? Like you're
right,
sitting there watching these situations and you can feel all the feelings, you can feel all the emotions, and it's like, I can't sit with this anymore. How do you then manage that?
right. Right, and that is the thing, and a couple of the people that I've spoken with earlier today, were on the young side, early 20s, and, they don't have that experience,
Mhm.
and when they're talking to me and I hear the pain in their voice and I feel what they're feeling, it's, it's really tough to tell someone, no, don't do that. You need to back up. What else can you do?
Mhm,
Maybe write a letter and don't send it.
mhm,
Those kinds of things. And I don't know what they're going to do. Honestly, I have no idea. But when you feel yourself going past that point of no return is what I always called it, because
mhm.
you know at one time when I worked in a recording studio, a band I had been recording gave me a t-shirt that said, caution, Mount St. Kelly's may erupt. And that's what happened, and not so much anymore. But I hear that in these younger
Mhm,
kids that I sort of mentor. And you go through all of the what helped me, what didn't help me things. And ultimately, everyone has to learn their own boundaries. Everyone has to learn how to handle their own, craziness, for lack of a better term. And that only comes through practice. That only comes through age. That only comes through experiences.
mhm.
And sometimes, and listening to one person in particular earlier, it's like I was listening to myself tell me about an experience I'd had earlier. And
Mhm,
I'm going in my head, oh no, I know what I did.
mhm.
I hope she doesn't do that. And it just really brought home that point that we really need to kind of be mindful, and we need to really forgive ourselves when we do go past that point. And I know a lot of us get hung up on that. Well, I shouldn't have done that, so I'm going to beat myself up over it for the next, millennium. And that's not helpful either. So really my whole point about being triggered and doing things, going, don't drive 45 miles chasing some idiot home, don't do those things, but forgive yourself for having that passion to say, do this. A lot of times that's what drives people. I'm obviously, everybody who ever has met me knows within 30 seconds, I am passionate about animals.
Mhm,
They have been there for me when no one else has been.
mhm.
And in this girl's case, she was very passionate about a certain group of people. So for her, her passion was like, but that's wrong. I must fix it. You must know why you're wrong. And that's not what it's about. I understand it. I've been there. I've done it myself. But
Mhm.
truly, it's not your place to try to teach every lesson to every person.
Talking about this brings another question up in my mind. How do you know when you get information, if it's positive information for you or if like it's negative energies coming in trying to get you to do other stuff? How do
Right.
you discern that difference?
I think sometimes, especially in when you're younger and in experiences, you can't tell the difference. You
Mhm,
kind of learn that once you're on the other side of the experience, and then you can go, "Oh, hey, that really wasn't what I should have been doing. That was very detrimental. It was very destructive. I shouldn't do that." Now I can kind of tell by how it feels. I can tell. I see colors. I see auras. I can tell by the colors that
mhm,
I see around situations. Um, But again, that's something that comes with experience. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a magic button we could push for all these younger people without this experience who could know? But it's really an individual thing, and you're not always going to make the right decision. Everybody makes
yeah.
mistakes. And
And I think too, I think it's also then looking back at situations, and it's like, okay, this was my gut response, and then this was the reaction. And then,
right.
okay, was that a situation that I should have trusted this on, or should I, and I don't, for myself, like I'll get these gut reactions and I'll be like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then, of course, that's the thing that was really going to help you. But it's like somehow our mind knows better than our gut reactions. And my experience has been that our gut reactions are probably the most accurate.
Yeah,
We then talk ourselves out of them.
we do. And there are, whoa, thousands of experiences in my own life,
Mhm.
where I can point to and say, "Oh, I didn't listen. I should have listened there." And even now, if it's an animal, I don't take time to listen, head, heart, whatever. I'm going. But sometimes, especially in personal relationships,
Mm.
that's when we really need to take that step back. I have a couple of friends right now who are fighting and they're arguing over something that is so stupid. I can't even believe it sparked an argument. And I so want to get in the middle and shake them both and say, what are you thinking? But I can't.
Mhm.
That's their lesson. It is their business. It is their situation. So I've learned through other experiences not to do those kinds of things. But it's very difficult when you can see all of the different pieces and parts and what happens, um, to bring people to that position where they're at each other's throats. But really, I think anytime it's another person, we really owe it to them and to ourselves and to our relationship to
Mhm.
take a giant step back and kind of let it go for a little while, let the anger or the disappointment or whatever the feelings are,
Mhm.
let those calm down and then maybe revisit it later. Because most of the people I know, I don't know any normal people. I think everybody I know is slightly off kilter and very passionate about something. And sometimes it's really difficult to keep everybody calm.
So I'm going to use myself as an example, and this is kind of embarrassing, but I'll share it anyway. So, I've been kind of in this, crossroads of, am I going to really embrace my gifts this time and not be the reluctant mystic anymore, or be the joyful
Mhm.
mystic and just accept things? So I don't know how many times I pulled this card for myself and other people pulled the light card for me. It happened in every single reading, and my friends were all laughing because they're like, when are you going to finally see it that you're the beacon of light that everybody
Right.
else goes to, and that you're the only one that doesn't see that? And some of that I know where it comes from is that I've gotten messages like, and I talked about it in my first book. I said a lot of things in my childhood that then came true, and it freaked out all the adults in my life. And then I wasn't allowed to speak after that. So sometimes I still have that feeling of like, should I really say this? What's the consequence for saying this? So I know that that's where the reluctant mystic part comes in. I
Mhm.
know the gifts that I was fortunate to come back with this in this lifetime. And I also know that now's the time. And I think it's, how do you learn to start to trust that?
Yeah.
How do you start to trust the nudges that you get, the synchronicities that happen? How do you start to pay attention to all those things to bring it all forward and go full circle?
And I also struggle with that.
Hmm.
And we've talked about this. It
Hmm.
seems so simple on the surface. Well, you just start doing. No, it's not that simple. It's really not that simple. And how do you, no matter what your gift is, how do you start,
Hmm.
really using that and being open with it? Now, I have often said I am like, incognito. Nobody knows who I am. It's like I am invisible. You do not see me. And I can go into places, farmers market, outdoor farmers market, dozens of people milling around. I'm the one, even though I have no table, I'm just walking around buying produce. I'm the one people walk up to and say, "Hey, could you do a reading for me?" Sorry, who are you? Where did you come from? And I know that is the universe saying you should be doing this.
Hmm.
And I know that. And I have the toughest time trusting that. And it's like, but no, but no. And my daughter tells me that, she says, you were probably burned at the stake every one of your previous lifetimes. I'm like, well, maybe that's why.
Or
I'm,
killed for your gifts. It wasn't
yeah,
not, we weren't all, I mean, a lot of us were burned at the stake, but we were also killed in various other ways for our gifts and our abilities.
yep.
I was just thinking about that invisible thing. And years ago, I was volunteering for this conference and I had to go to the airport to pick up a speaker. Well, while I was waiting for the speaker, because I got there before the flight was in, I sat down in a chair, and John Kerry there was walking by, and there was this secret Democratic meeting. He sits down. there's empty seats on either side of me. He sits down right next to me and starts having this whole conversation that I should not be overhearing. I'm like, do I exist? Like, I'm like, there's 10 seats to my left. He sat down in the seat right next to me and started having the conversation.
Yep. Yeah.
That was an experience I don't think I'll ever forget. I just found it so funny.
But we do that. And, we both have that ability to do that. If I don't want someone to approach me, they won't even know I am there. And it's funny how we do that. And I realized at the farmer's market of all places that maybe I'm doing that too often. Maybe I should be more out there.
Mhm,
But, that goes back to what you were saying. How do you trust?
mhm.
It seems like it's a simple thing, but in practice, it's big. It's really big.
Well,
And
especially our generation, like some of
yeah,
the kids who are coming in who are probably in their teens, even the children now, or some of like adolescents, early 20s, they have a much greater sense of trusting their
right.
gifts and abilities. And they'll be like, no, you're wrong. And I know you're wrong. And I can prove it. Whereas we were brought up to question everything, to not believe the information that we were getting. So, how
Mhm.
do you work past that to start to be okay with it?
Right. Right. And that kind of leads back into something we were talking about before the show on
Mhm,
readings. How
mhm,
many readings have you gotten that said you should be doing X, Y, and Z? And yeah, okay. How?
mhm,
Why do I trust that? And then there are other readings that I've had that have told me things that are way off.
mhm,
And it's just um, I know every reader is different, just like every healer is different. And sometimes we are told things that are completely contradictory to what we feel and to what our truth is.
mhm. Somebody was just agreeing with the empty seats all around.
Yep.
And one of my friends told me to watch because I just started streaming on the Discovery Channel, and there's this show called The Healer.
Yep.
And I literally started crying when I watched the first episode because I'm like, here's this younger guy doing this, and I have all those gifts and abilities. I've
Right.
just always been too afraid to use them.
Right.
Like, I could see everything he was doing on the show while he was doing it. I knew exactly what he was working on. I knew exactly what he was rearranging. I knew where all the issues were. But it's like I've just never had the confidence to put myself out there like that. So again, how do you start to trust yourself?
Right. I think that has to come from inside ourselves.
Mhm,
And believe me, I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress here. But some days are easier than others too. And it kind of, for me, it kind of depends. I don't want to say like the phase of the moon or anything like, but
mhm.
that's kind of what it is.
Right.
It's today, it's a new moon. Today I got all of these calls back to back to back to back to back. And I went back and I looked at my calendar. Last new moon, got all these calls back to back to back to back from the same people, same situations. So it kind of tells me that maybe there is more to it than I am trusting,
Mhm,
and that's been my big thing my whole life. I come from trauma after trauma after trauma. When I was coaching people, I called myself the trauma queen because there is very little trauma types that I have not experienced in my life at
mhm,
one time or another. And I think that makes me a lot less trusting of
mhm,
information that I get. And it also makes me less trusting of information that other people give me. I sort of go through things where, okay, I'm going to take this information and I'm going to dissect it.
mhm.
And then I'm going to translate it into 7 different languages and dissect it into each of those. And then I'm going to do a synopsis of everything. And 6 months down the road, maybe I'll come to a conclusion. But yeah, how do you trust? How do you have that confidence in yourself? How do you build that to trust yourself.
Well, and that was one of the reasons why I made myself really vulnerable on this podcast and use myself as an example, because I get this a lot from people. Well, if you don't trust yourself and you have all these gifts, how the hell am I supposed to trust myself?
Hmm.
And I'm like, but we're all still human. It doesn't matter that I have all these gifts. I'm still working through human issues that
Right.
I still need to address. And to answer your question that we were talking about a little earlier is like, how do you know if a reader or a healer is good? My experience has been when I do readings and healings, and I don't know why I use this as a touchstone, people start crying or they get goosebumps or things like that. And when you can see that it's really resonating with them or making
Yeah.
a difference, then you know. But if you're sitting across from a reader and you can tell they're just like flipping the cards over and looking at the cards and telling you the definition of the card, and
Right.
you're not connecting to anything they're saying, then it's probably not a very good reading. Because to
Right.
be honest, and most people know this, I've said it all the time, a good reader doesn't need cards. A
Right.
good reader just uses the cards to help you. A
Right.
good reader is able to tap into your energy field and read that, and the cards are just going along with it.
Right. Yeah. That's when I was a very young child. My family is confused. They're Christian pagans, but and a little bit of Jewish thrown in there. But when I was little, I had picked up a rock at
Mhm,
the beach, and that was my rock. And I would tell that rock all of my deepest, darkest secrets and all of these things. And when I lost the rock one day, and I
mhm,
was heartbroken over a rock. And I still
mhm,
like rocks though. And a teacher at my school asked me what I was upset about. And I told her, and she said, you know what? That's just a tool. All of those things that you were putting into that rock are in you.
mhm,
And you don't need that. You don't need a tool.
mhm.
You can just do it. And for some reason, that resonated with me deeper than anything else she ever taught me in third grade. It was just, that's what I remember from third grade. But it's true. So many readers think they have to have a tool. They have to have cards, or they have to have runes, or they have to have crystals, or they have to have some. No, you don't. You
Mhm,
don't need any of that. And I'm very fond of journaling and writing things down. And
mhm,
tonight, new moon, I will do my new moon thing and I'll write down intentions and things and I'll burn the paper. But truthfully, I could do that in my head.
mhm.
That's a tool. And a lot of times we use those tools to help us.
Well, I think though there's an added part to that. Yes, it's a tool, but there's also something sacred about ceremony.
There is. Yeah.
So writing it down and then burning it and having that same ritual every time there's a new moon or something like that, I think that feeds our soul. When
Yeah.
we do things like that, yeah, yes, it's a tool to do it, but the part about ceremony and doing some things very consistently, I think is very underrated.
Yeah, I think you're right. I know I've done a new moon ritual on a plane in the middle of the night, flying back from Hawaii, in my head.
Mhm,
And if you can visualize yourself doing each step of your ritual, I think
mhm,
that's kind of the same thing. At least it works for me. But everybody needs to find what works for them.
mhm,
I've coached people who don't want to bother with writing things down and printing them. That just it makes no sense to them. But they'll do something else. And if we find our own rituals
mhm.
that resonate with each one of us, I think that's really the key in whatever, I don't know if you want to call it a practice or modality or whatever it is. That's key. What works for you is what works for you.
And my experience has been doing so many readings and stuff like that. Well, what works for you? I want to do that.
Right.
People a lot of times just want the answers. They don't want to figure out for themselves what their process is or what works for them. And I think you shortchange yourself by not doing that.
Yeah. I think sometimes people are lazy And they do. They just want to find a reader. Oh, I could never do that myself. That's why I pay you. And I tell everyone, every single reading I've done, every single person I've coached, you can do this for yourself.
Mhm.
And I know there are, famous quote unquote psychics, and I hate that word, but, and they are making buku bucks. That's not me. That's not my heart. My heart tells me that, yeah, I deserve to make a living. Of course I do. And there has to be some sort of energy exchange.
Mhm.
But where I live, an energy exchange might be a dozen eggs.
Mhm.
And that's fine. I'm good with that. But I live in a place that it doesn't cost a lot to live.
Mhm.
If I were back in San Francisco or in another large area, that dozen eggs wouldn't do it for me.
Mhm.
And I think that's important for people who are looking for a healer, looking for a reader, to recognize yes, these are gifts that we have,
Mhm.
but they're also something we need an energy exchange for, especially healing.
Mhm.
If you're coming to me for healing, for energy healing,
Mhm.
and you don't see that there needs to be some sort of an exchange, you're probably not going to benefit very much from that healing, or you won't get as much out of it. And that's not something I do. That's the way the universe works.
Mhm.
There needs to be an energy exchange, whatever that is. That's like when I was a real estate broker, people would say, well, can't I give this property to someone? Yes, you can, but it has to be an exchange.
Mhm.
You can say your exchange is for love and affection.
Mhm.
You can say your exchange is for 25 cents, but
Mhm.
there has to be some sort of an exchange. And energy work is like that too. There
Mhm.
needs to be an exchange. Now I will get off my soapbox about people not wanting to do
No,
that.
I think that's really important. And the other thing that's coming up in my head, and that I've had this comment made a lot to me, and I'm kind of doing it in my own head, is what do you do when you've taken that risk and put something out there that you're then like, oh my God, I shouldn't have just said that?
Yeah, that happens. And I just say, well, it's out there, do with it what you will. Um, I had an older friend when I was very young and still learning how to do things, who told me the advantage to seeing the future sometimes is that you can change it.
Mhm.
And that kind of stuck with me. Sometimes we are given messages for people,
Mhm.
not necessarily because this is absolutely happening. It's more like this will happen if you don't do something. I had an older gentleman one time, and I kept seeing a stroke. I kept seeing it very, very clearly. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, maybe a visit to your doctor is in order, because what I'm seeing is there might be some kind of a health issue
Mhm.
on the horizon. And he said, you're not going to tell me I'm going to have a stroke. My daughter already told me that yesterday. She had a dream I had a stroke. Okay, that's from two sources. Maybe get it checked out.
Mhm.
And he did. And, crisis averted. He did ultimately have a stroke, but it was much smaller
Mhm.
than it probably would have been. Sometimes we see things and we're given messages that we don't want to. I don't want to say that. No, I'm not going to do that.
I
No,
had a reading with a woman years ago, and I'm like, you're going to lose your job, but don't panic because you're going to have a new one in like 6 weeks. She's like, why would you tell me that? I'm like,
right.
that's one of the scenarios they're showing me right now. I said, the most important thing isn't that you're going to lose your job. The most important thing is that this is a stepping stone and that the new one is going to be coming in very, very quickly. And that's what they want you to focus on. She called me like, I don't know, like 3 months later and said, everything happened as you said it would. And she's like, I stayed calm because you told me not to worry that you saw something else coming in.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the point. People need to know they're going to be okay.
Mhm.
And I've had so many people have come to me with questions. I don't usually do that, but if somebody comes to me with a question, I'll do my best to get them an answer.
Mhm.
Sometimes there are no answers.
Mhm.
And then they look at me like, well, that's not helpful. Well, if if spirit is not talking, I cannot reach through the veil and choke them into getting you an answer. And everybody has gone through that. Everyone I know that does readings has gone through that. Someone demands a particular answer to a particular question, and there is no answer forthcoming.
Well, and then you have the other people who do readings who then scare you so that you end up paying them thousands of dollars to remove curses that they say you have and things like that. I always tell my friends, if you go to one, like I had a coworker who went to one and she's like, I've paid her like $3,000,
Oh,
nothing's
wow.
better. I'm like, because there was nothing wrong in the first place. She's just taking your money, basically.
Right.
And I think that that's where the concept of psychics, sometimes give people a bad name,
Yeah, that's a
you know,
charlatan. You know, that, that's
just
that's
but they
not
call themselves psychics, so it puts it out there under that
right,
umbrella. So,
right. I've had where I grew up, there was a lot of like voodoo practicing and stuff.
mhm,
And do what you want. I don't care. Leave me out of it.
mhm,
Don't harm my snake. These people wanted to borrow. I had pet snakes. I was every mother's dream of a daughter. I had pet snakes and mud wrestled. But they got accused often by other people in the area. They put a curse on me. They didn't put a curse on you. That's not what they did. They did not. I promise you. But people kind of want to not take responsibility for what goes wrong in their own lives.
mhm,
So if, in this one particular instance, this man was so convinced that someone put a curse on him, he paid thousands of dollars to different people to
mhm.
get them to remove this curse that didn't exist in the first place. And he came to me and he says, well, I need a new reading because I've had the curse removed. Um, okay. But he didn't want to take responsibility for the things that he did wrong.
Mhm.
If you're not being a good person and you're not treating people with respect that they deserve, maybe things in your life are not going to be so good,
Mhm.
but people don't want to hear that. They want to blame it on something. But
And
yeah,
I always know for me when I do readings, like I'm not saying I don't get negative information because I do, but it's how you give it to the person.
mhm,
Like, because I'll always say that this is a reading as of where you are right now. 2 months from now, you can come back. I could give you a completely different reading. I said,
right,
that doesn't mean what I told you now isn't true. It's just that you have choices and it's impacting then what's going to happen. But like the thing with the job, and like I've told people, a lot of things they didn't want to hear, or that's usually when I make people cry. Um, and then because they start crying because like, that's so true. I've never told anyone that. How do you know that? And I tend to do readings more probably because of my background around emotion and feeling and like past life stuff comes up and things like that. And sometimes I'll bring in people who've crossed over and sometimes I'll throw in a little healing work with that. But I think it's just about staying open and trusting who's working with you. And also, maybe having a practice around how you ask for things to come in and only saying you want things of the light and of the highest vibration that you can handle, I think is another big thing.
right. I think it's also important to know that there are some very bad people who can actually send a negative something to you.
Hmm.
Um, if that's the situation that people might find, I don't know why I'm even saying it, but if that's your situation, know that you can call in your own angels and guides and divine beings and get rid of that immediately.
Hmm.
Um, you're not helpless. And I think a lot of times people, especially when they're down or when something bad has happened, they feel helpless. You're never helpless. You may not like it, but you're never helpless.
Hmm. Somebody I know is just giving me an update on something they were going through tomorrow. So, anyone who's watching have any questions for us today? And yeah, Kelly, you and I talked about this before we went on, that we never really plan what we're going to talk about or where we're going to. We'll have like an idea, an overall
Right.
census. Like for myself, I had no idea I was going to bring up that healing stuff. And, I've talked about when I did podcasts with you, I talked about some pretty controversial subjects that afterwards I was like, why did I talk about that? And I think that that's that trusting that obviously I'm talking about this because not only one, do I need to talk about it, but somebody else who's listening or going to watch this at
Yeah.
a later date really needed that information. And that's why I was guided to bring that up today. Because sometimes I'll listen back to these and I'm like, wonder why I brought that up, or I wonder why that came up, or I wonder why I shared that personal story that I had no intentions of talking about. Um, but I always also believe that you lead by example. And if I'm putting myself out there saying I'm willing to talk about all things metaphysical, then I
Yeah.
need to talk about all things metaphysical. And that's the good, the bad, and the ugly of the metaphysical.
Yeah. And it's not always pretty.
Mhm.
It's really not. One day I'll talk about my paranormal investigation experiences. Today is not that day, but believe me when I say it's never pretty sometimes. Um, it's I don't
And
know.
at some point, we should probably talk about multidimensional beings that we keep
Yeah, we should do
kind of
that too.
avoiding that topic.
I know we are avoiding it. Uh, Something I deal with on a daily basis, as do you. But sometimes I listen back to old podcasts. I started
Mhm,
podcasting like 10, 12 years ago. And I
mhm.
will go back and listen to some of the things that I said. And I'm like, whoa, who was that? That was really smart. And it was funny to me because recently I went back and re-listened to a lot of the old podcasts that I did with someone I'm now doing podcasts with it in. And there was a show where I actually said I could see a day where this, and this were going to happen. And I just said it so matter of factly back then. And when I listened back to it the other day, I was like, whoa, every single one of those things happened.
Mhm.
And it was like, 8 years ago. That one was from 8 years ago. And it just really shook me. It's like, I never know what's going to come out of my mouth. Truly, I don't. When I wrote my first book,
Mhm.
I go back and read it now and I'm like, wow, that's really good advice. Who wrote
Who did I channel while I was writing that?
that? And it's just funny how things work. And there was a time in my life where I would get really upset over it, over
Mhm.
those things. I would just be in tears. Why didn't I listen to myself? Blah, blah. And you know what? It doesn't matter. And,
But
in
you
the
weren't
word,
in a space to listen to yourself at that time. Like,
right.
you were just planting the seeds, and sometimes, like my favorite quote is by Soren Kierkegaard, Swedish philosopher, and it's something to the effect of life must be lived forwards and only understood backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Exactly.
don't often know why we're going through things when we're going through them. It's not
Right.
so we look back later on, which leads me to my other favorite thing to talk about, my turn to be on the soapbox for a minute. In Zen philosophy, they believe the positive and the negative happen simultaneously, and then we pick which direction we're going to go. Because how many people have had the experience of, oh my God, I'm so glad this happened because it got me here, but at the time you thought it was the worst thing in the world that ever happened to you? The
Yeah.
actual situation didn't change. Your perspective and the work that you've done are causing you to look at it differently and seeing the gifts that were in the situation that you were unable to see at the time of it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
so
It's,
that's probably a really good place for us to end tonight.
yep. Yep.
So thanks everyone for watching. Those of you who want to watch this again or just catching it on YouTube, which I'll post later tonight, if you have questions or things come up, please contact us. We look forward to answering any and all questions related
Yep.
to metaphysical. See you guys soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.